Hey, my relatives. Hello, this is Mark Charles, and it is Wednesday, January 19th, I believe, if I remember correctly. Yes, it's January 19th already. And I'm sitting down to start my second cup of coffee. Actually, I've been nursing it for a little while, but I really wanted to jump online today and talk with you about something that I'm doing. As you saw in the title, I'm actually launched today a new Patreon page. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, why I did it, what I'm trying to do there, and what the goals are that I'm working towards. Anyway, before I begin, let me start just by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you today from what's now known as Washington, D.C., and that these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. I want to honor and the Piscataway. I want to honor the Piscataway as the host people of these lands. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands, and I want to state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. So, my Piscataway relatives, it is an honor to be here today. So, if you haven't heard of Patreon, it is a content creators kind of subscription site where people who create content, whether it's art or whether it's music or whether it's podcasts or videos or almost anything you want, if you are a content creator in any way, shape, or form, Patreon is a site where you can go and you can kind of promote your work and people can subscribe to your work. It's a little bit different from anything like GoFundMe or from Kickstarter or something like that, because those are about launching businesses or about kind of certain projects, whereas Patreon is more about a way for an artist or a content creator to invite people into the process of their creation, of their creating, give people some behind the scenes benefits, some ways to kind of feel and included in the process of the creation. And then for the subscription price, that empowers and helps the creator earn a living, reinvest back in their work, whatever else kind of needs to be done. And so I've known about Patreon for a while and was kind of interested in doing it. I think I checked it out maybe a few years ago. I forget the first time I really looked into it, but wasn't until just these past few months. Actually, it was the Omicron variant that got me thinking more about doing something on Patreon. As you know, for the past 2 years, we've been in this pandemic, and one of the first things to go was large public gatherings for the sake of conferences or things like that. Those were quick to go early in the pandemic, and they are kind of the slowest to come back. And the bulk of my income, the most of the money that I earn annually, comes from my public speaking. And so for the past 2 years, I've done very little in-person public speaking. A lot of it moved online, and that created some benefit. I've traveled once really, or maybe 2 or 3 times in the past 2 years. So it's been great to be able to do online events here at the house and just jump on Zoom or some other streaming service and preach a sermon or speak at a conference or give a webinar. The challenge with a lot of the virtual work and speaking that I've been doing is most of the time those virtual events are planned much sooner and quicker. Whereas for an in-person event, you'll usually be able to plan 3, 4 months out. A lot of virtual events don't get planned until maybe 1 month, maybe even just a few weeks ahead of time, because you don't have to rent halls and a bunch of other stuff. And in my experience, virtual events tend to pay about half of what a physical in-person event would pay. And so the benefit is you can do more virtual events, but the challenge is you don't kind of know what's coming down the road. You don't get contacted until more towards the last minute. And I was really hoping 2022 would be the year where in-person speaking would begin to kind of take an uptick again. But as we went into December, and every year between Thanksgiving and the middle to end of January, I have my public speaking basically shuts down. After Thanksgiving, there's very few conferences. Most churches are focused on Christmas. things. And so there's very little public speaking I do, usually between Thanksgiving and the middle to end of January, when things begin ramping back up with schools and other stuff like that. And it's a nice break, because actually every year between Columbus Day and Thanksgiving, those are my busiest 6 to 8 weeks of the year. With probably about a quarter to a third of my income being made during the time between Columbus Day and Thanksgiving. And so I always kind of welcome the break I get in December and January. But as I was going into December, and Omicron hit, and some of my events, especially my events in January and February that were being planned for in-person, began going tentative, and a few of them got postponed, and some of them are kind of on the verge of being canceled. And so I had to start thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to continue to pay the bills? How am I going to continue to bring in some income? Because now not only are in-person events not being scheduled, but even it seems like some virtual events are being put on hold, because people just don't know how to plan right now. They're not sure what's going to be happening with the variant and what's going to happen with these events. So anyway, I had a bunch of time this past 6 weeks, and I began doing some investigating more into Patreon, and decided that I wanted to use the Patreon platform to not only to give me a much more stable income, where rather than my income coming from events that are kind of scattered and spotted throughout the year, but I could actually gain income that could come in on a monthly basis, because the subscriptions to Patreon get paid every month. And so that allows you to have more of a steady stream of income. And this is something very helpful for artists and creators, because again, most of the time an artist or creator is used to their income coming in spurts rather than in a steady stream. And so I thought, well, let me try and do that. And so I've spent the last 2 or 3 weeks really thinking through, what would it look like to do this? How would I even construct my Patreon page? What would I say I'm creating? What's the goal of the page? And all these different sort of things. And so I'm going to share the link to my Patreon page right now. I'll put that into the comment section. And let me put on my glasses so I can actually do here. Hey, Adam, it's good to see you there. Diana, great to be on. Thanks for joining me today. I'm glad that both of you are here. And there's some other people on the line as well. So Yat A, thanks for joining me. So here is the link to my Patreon page. And I'll share, I have a link that I'm going to share on my screen. So I'll bring that on right now. So this is what my Patreon page looks like. At the moment, we only have 2 levels. And I'll talk about the levels in just a moment. But the thing I wanted to highlight up here is at the top, where it says Mark Charles is creating. And this is where I had to decide, what am I creating? Am I creating a podcast? Am I creating a YouTube video series? Am I creating promotion for a book? What am I trying to create? And, at the heart of my work for the past decade, I've been trying to initiate a national dialogue on race, gender, and class. It was back in almost a decade ago, 7 or 8, maybe 9 years ago, when I came to the conclusion that the United States of America, in response to our genocidal ethnic cleansing history that includes enslavement and dehumanizing of people of color, that our nation needed a national dialogue on race, gender, and class. And I've spent a lot of my time talking about that. I've structured lectures. I've written op-eds. I've worked very hard to initiate this more national dialogue in our country. We read the apology in front of the Capitol building in 2012. I've been lecturing about this all over the country, even all over the world. Even that was one of the visions behind my campaign for president in 2020, where one of the key planks of my platform was this national dialogue on race, gender, and class. It's one of the goals I lay out in my TEDx talk on our foundations. It's even one of the goals we lay out in our book, Unsettling Truths. And so at the end of the day, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create this national dialogue. And so I decided, yeah, it's not something simple like a podcast. It's not something as specific as a YouTube video or a documentary or something like that. But no, I want to create this dialogue, and I want to give people a chance to not only listen to me and engage with me and promote it on their own, but to actually begin to partner with me by subscribing to the work that I'm doing and by subscribing to my Patreon and allowing me to keep my income a bit more steady instead of the fluctuations I have right now from month to month and week to week. And then to how can I bring people into that, and how can we expand the conversation? Because that's the other challenge. And one of the testimonies I read about someone who was using Patreon was they were talking about how they loved having an engaged audience like you have on Patreon, right? Because if someone's going to subscribe to you, they're going to pay monthly into your work. They're going to be engaged. They're going to want to be interacting and talking about what you're doing. They want to be helpful. They're, very rarely you're going to have a troll who's going to subscribe to you just so they can, say their comments. And so you tend to have a very engaged and a very positive audience. And one of the testimonies I read was someone said that they would rather have 3,000 followers on Patreon, 3,000 subscribers on Patreon, than 300,000 followers on Twitter, or even 3 million followers on Twitter. I forget the exact number they used. But the point was, when you have this smaller audience that you're really engaged with, there's some things that really does to your work that empowers it, that motivates you, and that really allows you to move it forward. And so that's where I thought, yeah, if we could begin to gather people through this Patreon site. The second thing I had to decide is, what's the goal, right? Am I producing things specifically for Patreon, or am I using Patreon to empower me to produce things publicly? And I decided, right, the goal of the work is the national dialogue. And the goal of the work is to bring this conversation to every corner of our society. And so the public work, right? The lectures that I give, the speeches that I give, the books that I write, the videos that I post, the social media things I put up, right? That's the goal, is these public things. And so I want to use Patreon as kind of my staging area, right? Patreon, where I have a very engaged, a very supportive audience. This is where I can give dress rehearsals of my public lectures. This is where I can refine the message and I can hone the answers to certain questions. This is where I can try new content out and see how it goes and make some adjustments to it before we put it out into the completely open public space. And so that's how I'm using my Patreon. And so my Patreon and my creation, which is this national dialogue on race, gender, and class, this isn't just a single medium or media that I'm using. So it's not just my second cup of coffee. It's not just the lectures that I give. It's really using all of these resources to further advance this conversation. Now, one of the most regular things I've done over the past year is, besides my public speaking, is to do my second cup of coffee right here 2 or 3 days a week. And so one of the things I'm offering, I have 2 subscription levels. I'll go back and show you my page again. I have 2 subscription levels here. The first is a $5 subscription level. And for this level, the supporters, this is the base of the support, right? Whenever you look at Patreon sites, the bulk of the people subscribing are subscribing at the base levels, the $5, maybe the $10 levels. And so these 2 levels I posted right now, these are going to be the base of the support I having moving forward. And so for those subscribers, I'm offering an ad-free videos of new episodes of my second cup of coffee and other content that I'm creating on my YouTube channel and other social media sites. Now, I haven't monetized my YouTube channel yet, but if you've watched my YouTube channel, you'll probably see that YouTube is serving you they're serving you ads anyway. I've seen some myself. Other people have said they're getting ads. And so by putting my videos into Patreon, I can serve you an ad-free version of my Second Cups of Coffee and other things I create for YouTube, and you can watch them there without having to look at ads. I've also had a lot of people, or several people, request for access to audio files, especially of my Second Cups of Coffee. And so the $5 tier level also, I'm posting the audio from my Second Cups of Coffee and other select videos. And so you can listen to it on your earbuds when you're driving, or when you're walking, or when you're out doing exercise, and you don't have to have a screen in front of you the entire time, but you can download it. Now, I won't be doing the audio live, but we'll upload it afterwards, and you'll be able to listen to it there. And then the third thing I'm offering is a bi-monthly blog post featuring links to content that's come out outside of my personal social media in the past few weeks, or that's coming up in the future. So podcasts that I've been interviewed on, or articles that I've written or that have come out, or other things that are out in the public space that I'm aware of, and we'll share those on this Patreon blog post that will go up twice a month. And so that's at the $5 level. The $10 level, you'll get access to all of the things from the first tier. And then this is the level where I'm beginning to really try to engage. And so I'm offering at this level 2 separate Q&As, 2 separate question and answers. One of the Q&As will be with me for 45 minutes. This will be in some kind of like a webinar type setting, whether it's Zoom or something else we do specifically on Patreon, but it will be for the Patreon subscribers and at this tier. And we'll have once a month, we'll have a 45-minute Q&A with me answering questions about the content I've created, answering questions about the work that I'm doing, answering questions about my book or other social media posts or things I've talked about in my Second Cup of Coffee, and just a way to have a kind of a deeper dive into that. And then the second Q&A a month will be with myself and a guest. I'm going to begin having guests on my Second Cups of Coffee. So we'll select one of those guests to come back, and we'll do a separate Q&A with myself and that guest, where you can ask questions either with a guest or someone else I partnered with or I'm working with, or another voice that I think is important in this work that we can bring on, and we'll have that part of the Q&A. And so those are the two Q&As that you'll get when you subscribe at the $10 a month level. Now we have some other tiers that I'm hoping to add later, maybe even as early as next month. I'm thinking about offering a tier that will offer a lecture, a full-on lecture every month, kind of on the newest material that I've been researching, or the things I've been putting together, or the different audiences I'm speaking it to. And so we'll offer anywhere from a 30 to 45 minute, maybe an hour-long lecture once a month, and that will be followed also by a Q&A. So these are the things that I'm hoping to start doing with my Patreon. And again, one of the goals of this is to stabilize my income, especially during the pandemic. But second, it's a way that people can support this work, and it can provide the resources for this work to actually grow, right? Because I'm not an employee of any single organization, and so I don't have the resources of a massive organization to invest in this, and because I'm not running for office, and I don't have a campaign and those types of resources to invest in this, I'm hoping to use this Patreon as a way to, yes, stabilize my income, but then also to give me some of the resources I need to invest in some of this content creation, whether it's editing videos or bringing on guests or other things, or travel and things that need to be done so we can go and engage these conversations more directly around the country. And so this is, I'm actually really excited about this. I feel like today is kind of the first day of a new job. And what it's allowing me to do, and one of the ways I'm thinking about this differently, is because the bulk of my income comes from my speaking events, I tend to focus a lot of my creative energy around those speaking events, What am I going to say? What's the content I want to deliver there? How am I going to bring this in? And then the other stuff I'm doing that I'm not getting paid for, my social media, my second cups of coffee, those I still invest energy in, but I use that, I see that almost as that kind of extra time where I'm not, I don't feel like I'm have the bandwidth to fully sit down and engage in that, because I have to make my speaking the priority. And what this Patreon will do is it will allow me to prioritize my content creation. And so I'll be able to prioritize not just the interactions I have with people on Patreon, but the videos that I'm posting on my YouTube channel, and even invest more heavily in my second cups of coffee. And, to even produce those better, to research them better, to kind of plan them and schedule them better, because it won't just be something I do when I have extra time. It'll be something I do that's part of my schedule. And this is much more of a higher priority. And so, yeah, I launched my Patreon site last night. I didn't promote it yet, but it went live last night. I put a link onto my website this morning, and as of the start of this broadcast, I had 2 patrons already. And then I'm launching it with this this second cup of coffee video, and then I will also share it on my social media this afternoon and see what else we can do. And I'm really not seeing this as, well, let's try it for a month or 2 and see what happens. I'm really looking at, I want to see over the next 6, 9, 12 months, can we make this work? Can this become something that really empowers this message to go much more broadly? If you've been following me for a while, you know the frustrations I have of trying to get this message kind of outside of my bubble. How do we break into new audiences? How do we produce content that goes into spaces where people aren't going to naturally be attuned to my voice or to the things I'm writing or speaking about? And I'm really hoping this Patreon site will give me the resources and the energy, as well as the input, to find out and to explore, hey, how can we do some things creative to get this message out, so that we really can create a national dialogue on race, gender, and class, a national truth and conciliation commission. This is the goal of my work. This has been the goal of what I've been trying to do for the past 10 years. And so I'm thrilled to start this. I'm excited about what may happen in the next few weeks and months. If you're wondering about the way Patreon works, if you subscribe today, you will pay the full subscription price for the month, and then it's called pay up front, which is the most common billing model on Patreon. And so if you subscribe at the $5 or $10 level today, you will be charged $5 or $10, and you'll have access to Patreon, my site on Patreon, for the rest of the month. And then on February 1st, you'll be charged again. So I wanted to start this to make sure I had enough time to still deliver the things that I promised to each tier in the month. And so I already began this morning by uploading back versions, going back to my first cup of coffee in January, which was on January 7th. I uploaded both the video and the audio to my Patreon this morning. I think I have 2 or 3 more episodes I'll need to upload later today or later to this week that will get up there. This episode will go up there. I'm hoping to do another episode tomorrow. And so those will be going on there. And then I have 2 Q&As for the people who subscribe at the $10 level. And so I'm hoping to do 1 Q&A. I tentatively want to try and do it on Friday, but that's when I thought I was going to be able to launch it yesterday. And so now we may do that first Q&A just with me on Monday. I'm still debating back and forth yet which way will be the most strategic to get the most people in there. And then next Friday, on the 28th of January, we will do another Q&A with a guest. So we'll be able to get both of those things in there as well before the end of the month. And so, and for people who want to support this work, even beyond the $10 tier level, you can subscribe for any amount you choose. And so someone already actually subscribed earlier today for $20. And so like that's fantastic. That's thrilling that they did that. I only offer tiers right now for the $5 and the $10 level. So if you subscribe for more than $10, that money will go into my Patreon, but there won't be any additional benefits you'll get yet. I am hoping to add 1 or 2 more tiers next month, and then hopefully things will begin to change and we'll have some higher level tiers there too. But yeah, I'm excited. I would love to see. I'm going to look through the comments here and see what people have been saying. But I welcome any thoughts you may have or questions you have on this. Lindsay, yes, anyone would be willing to have a higher price for folks who can afford to pay more. Absolutely. I will get to those higher tiers level, but if they later, but when I know I can deliver the benefits, but if people want to subscribe at a higher level right now, they absolutely can. It just won't change their benefits at the moment. And so, yeah, Patreon does charge a commission. They do. And so they try to make it the billing as seamless as possible. So they take a commission out of the money that you support me with, that you subscribe to me with, but that's, their fee for running the site, for providing the platform, for doing the billing services. So I don't have to worry about any of that. And so it's a good, I thought it was reasonable, the rates that they're charging, and I feel good about what the services that they're providing. So, Jim, Mark Charles deserves millions of subscribers. One of the things that got me excited is there are several Patreon accounts that have 10, 20, 30, 40,000 subscribers. And again, the bulk of the subscribers are at the lower tiers. But I could only imagine, and as I looked at the people who had subscribers at that level, or in those numbers, and I looked at their content that they were putting out on YouTube, and the podcast they were doing, and the other stuff that they were using their Patreon to fund, it was exciting to see the stuff that they were doing. And so I found myself for the first time thinking really creatively of, wow, if we were able to build a good base of subscribers, what are the things that we could do? Right? What are the things that we could use those resources to invest back into the work, whether it's to promote, one thought I had was it might be great if we have the resources, to take my book and to try and get a copy of my book to every federally recognized tribe in the country. Right? Wouldn't that be fantastic? A great way to use some ways of investing this back in to try and promote this and get this message out there even further. So there's a lot of ways where I find myself thinking very creatively about what is possible and what could happen next. So yeah, I want to thank everybody for listening and joining with me today. I will put the Patreon link in here one more time if you would like to watch this, and if you're interested, feel free to share that on your social media. Also on my Patreon site is a link to a YouTube video, kind of a 6-minute YouTube video that I posted yesterday describing some of my vision for this site and how I want to use it. I'm going to post the link to that video directly here. If you want to see that video outside of the Patreon site, you can see that there too. But anyway, my Patreon is not going to change my level of engagement that I'm doing publicly right now. So even if you don't subscribe to me on Patreon, you will still see my Second Cups of Coffee. You will still see me posting on social media. I will still be doing all these things, and hopefully you'll see those become even better, because I'll have more energy and resources to invest in the creation of those things. So I'm not going to diminish anything I'm doing publicly, but I am going to do some things so we can create the best content, kind of put the best resources forward so that we can get a national dialogue going, right? I'm excited about what we're going to do. So, my relatives, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that your second cup of coffee is as good as mine is. And walk in beauty. And maybe learn how to walk in beauty together. Ahiahat and Hakone.